A single player, the ball, at 15,000 fans holding their breath, yet what happens before the shot often matters more than the release itself. From humming at the line to spitting out gum, NBA free throw rituals reveal hidden battles of psychology, rhythm, and superstition that shape the outcome of games and championships. Rick Barry introduces the underhand free throw, or granny shot, during the 1966 ABA Finals, where the San Francisco Warriors faced the Philadelphia 76ers. At a time when the average free throw percentage hovers around 72%, Barry consistently tracks above 88%. By the end of his career, he records an 89.3% mark, which ranks among the highest in league history. His willingness to adopt a technique that players dismiss as childish demonstrates a clear preference for efficiency over image. Barry's teammates often mock the form, and fans laugh each time he bends his knees and flips the ball upward with two hands. Yet his statistical dominance forces opponents to take notice because the routine works, especially under playoff pressure when margins tighten. Despite ridicule, Barry refuses to abandon the method, citing the numbers as irrefutable proof of its value. His sons experiment with the shot during their own careers, but eventually abandon it, reinforcing how difficult it is to maintain under public scrutiny. Barry's stubborn commitment, however, sets the stage for future discussions on whether effectiveness should outweigh aesthetics, leading directly into the awkward contrast of Karl Malone's famously long routine. Karl Malone builds one of the longest free throw routines in league history, stretching nearly 20 seconds before releasing the ball. Each attempt follows the same sequence: several deliberate dribbles, a jersey wipe, and a quiet mutter to himself. Over his career, Malone attempts 9,787 free throws, the second highest total in NBA history, making his routine a familiar sight in arenas across the country. Because games frequently pause for his preparation, opposing crowds grow impatient and boo, while Utah fans respond by falling completely silent. The NBA eventually tightens its enforcement of the 10-second rule, forcing Malone to slightly shorten his approach. Still, referees rarely penalize him, allowing the mailman to operate on his own schedule until his retirement. The routine becomes inseparable from his image, reinforcing both his nickname and his reputation for reliability under pressure. Even if his playoff percentages sometimes lag behind his regular season numbers, Malone's ritual highlights how timing and repetition can become as important as mechanics, setting the stage for Shaquille O'Neal's much different battle with the line. Jason Kidd enters the league in 1994 as a 21-year-old rookie guard for Dallas, immediately noticeable for his shaky free throw accuracy at just 69%. To stabilize his approach, he develops a ritual of blowing a kiss toward the rim before every attempt, a motion explained as a tribute to his family following a highly publicized divorce. The gesture becomes part of his identity, turning each trip to the line into a personal statement as much as a scoring opportunity. Crowds quickly latch onto it, with opposing fans mocking the kiss while Mavericks supporters embrace it as part of Kidd's routine. Over nearly 2 decades, he raises his free throw percentage to 78.6 by the time of retirement, showing how a ritual initially dismissed as quirky evolves into effective repetition. In many arenas, entire sections mimic the kiss before his shots, making his free throw routine one of the most recognizable in league history. Even though the action itself had no mechanical function, it structured his rhythm and calmed his focus. Kidd's visible performance of routine marks a contrast with players whose rituals stay hidden, leading directly to Gilbert Arenas' theatrical approach in the mid-2000s. Shaquille O'Neal closes his career with a free throw percentage of just 50.7, the lowest among NBA players who scored more than 20,000 points. His struggles force constant experimentation, including one-handed push attempts and awkward spins that rarely improve consistency. Opponents recognize the inefficiency and adjust accordingly, sending him to the line deliberately to reduce Los Angeles' offensive output. The tactic proved so common during the 2000 finals that commentators coined the phrase hack-a-shack to describe intentional fouling. During his peak Lakers years, the team averages 27 free throw attempts per game, with O'Neal often accounting for half of them. Because he converts barely over half, the math works in opponents' favor, turning a superstar's weakness into a strategy. Fans amplify the humiliation by mocking every airball broadcast to national television, reinforcing the perception that O'Neal's dominance inside the paint collapses at the charity stripe. Even when he scores 38 points in a finals game, his missed free throws remain a post-game story. The deliberate fouling of O'Neal sets the precedent for later strategies, targeting other poor shooters, most notably Dwight Howard. Nick Van Exel develops one of the league's strangest free throw routines by consistently stepping a full feet behind the regulation line before releasing. Despite the added distance, he maintains a 79.4% career average, nearly identical to the league baseline. Officials review the form multiple times during his career, but never call a violation, reasoning that he still releases from behind the designated stripe. Because referees allow the practice, Van Exel turns an idiosyncrasy into habit, one that becomes a signature part of his identity at the line. The most famous instance arrives during the 1995 playoffs when Los Angeles faces Phoenix. With the game on the line, Van Exel calmly backs up, sets his feet well behind the arc of paint, and sinks the clinching free throw. The decision not only eliminates Phoenix, but also sparks endless debates about whether the NBA should clarify its positioning rules. Playground players across Los Angeles quickly copy the move, backing away from the stripe in pickup games just to mimic Van Exel. The unusual routine remains tolerated through his career, ranging toward later eras when stars like Gilbert Arenas and Jason Kidd experiment with similarly personal rituals. Gilbert Arenas, known across the league as Agent Zero, develops one of the most unusual free throw routines of the 2000s. During the 2006-07 season, when he posts a career-best 91% from the line, he consistently follows the same pattern: bounce the ball once, spin backwards, and then settle into his shooting stance. The motion draws attention because most players favor a steady dribble rhythm, but Arenas deliberately breaks that expectation. He often locks eyes with his defender after the spin, using the moment to unsettle opponents while establishing his own concentration. The reverse spin becomes a signature that fans immediately recognize in highlight reels because the routine coincides with his most productive years. Teammates view it as part of his overall offensive confidence. Arenas averages over 28 points per game the same season, so every free throw carries weight in Washington's scoring output. However, by 2010 his career unravels after a highly publicized suspension for a locker room incident, and the ritual disappears from NBA floors. The absence illustrates how fragile the connection is between superstition and longevity. Once the player's career collapses, the ritual vanishes as well. That decline sets up a contrast with other shooters whose rituals endure even after peak seasons. Kevin Garnett, the 2004 NBA Most Valuable Player with 24 point-to-points and 13.9 rebounds per game, develops a free throw ritual that captures national attention. Before releasing the ball, he presses it to his lips in a quick kiss that fixes an unblinking stare at the rim. The motion contrasts sharply with his intense court demeanor, blending a moment of private focus with an outward show of intimidation. Because Garnett performs the kiss before nearly every attempt, fans and cameras quickly associate it with his fiery persona and relentless work ethic. Teammates sometimes joke that the gesture looked like a romance with the basketball, but Garnett insisted it was about concentration. When Garnett joins Boston in 2007, the ritual becomes a staple on national broadcasts during the Celtics' 2008 championship run. Viewers watch him combine the kiss with his trademark glare, reinforcing the image of a player who dominates both psychologically and physically. The unusual routine embodies Garnett's broader approach rituals that heighten intensity, while signaling defiance toward opponents. Because the Celtics' finals victory cements his legacy, the kiss remains one of the most memorable quirks in modern NBA free throw history. This sets the stage for later stars whose idiosyncrasies achieve similar visibility. During championship campaigns, Steve Nash, a two-time MVP and the league's career free throw leader at 90.4%, never follows a fixed routine at the line. Instead of repeating the same sequence, he alternates gestures, rubbing his hair, wiping his hands, or adjusting his shorts before settling into his shot. Because Nash avoids predictability, defenders cannot time their movements or attempt to disrupt his rhythm. His success validates the approach, since he ranks third all-time in free throw accuracy and regularly posts percentages above 90% across multiple seasons. The unpredictability mirrors his improvisational style as a passer, where no two possessions look alike. During the Phoenix Suns' 7 seconds or less era from 2005 to 2007, Nash's approach to free throws contrasts with the team's emphasis on speed. While the offense thrives on rapid possessions, Nash deliberately slows himself at the stripe, using his inconsistent gestures as a method of control. The balance proves effective. In this stretch, he records consecutive 5-0 for 090 seasons, an efficiency benchmark achieved by only a handful of players in league history, because his idiosyncrasies never hinder results. Nash's shifting rituals demonstrate that consistency in outcome can override inconsistency in process. This sets a precedent for later guards whose personal quirks do not conform to textbook mechanics, but still yield elite accuracy. Giannis Antetokounmpo, a two-time MVP standing 6'11" with a 7 feet 3 wingspan, develops one of the league's slowest free throw routines by averaging 11 to 13 seconds before release. Because NBA rules set a 10-second limit, opposing crowds exploit the delay by loudly counting past the threshold. During nationally televised games, the 2021 Finals spotlight the issue most dramatically, as Phoenix fans chant to 13 while Giannis attempts to focus on form. Despite the pressure, he maintains composure, recording a 76.7% free throw rate across that postseason and efficiency, above his career average. The longer routine becomes both a target of ridicule and a symbol of his determination. The perfect mechanics under stress. The culmination arrives in Game 6 of the 2021 Finals, when Milwaukee secures the title after Giannis converts 17 of 19 attempts from the line. Because those shots account for 89.5% accuracy, the performance neutralizes Phoenix's strategy of exploiting his delay and reinforces the Bucks' scoring margin in a championship-clinching win. Meanwhile, the league office quietly reviews complaints about his extended pauses, though no official penalty emerges beyond heightened scrutiny from referees. The episode illustrates how a player's ritual can generate league-wide conversation about enforcement, while simultaneously shaping postseason outcomes. The investigation into Giannis' timing marks the first time in decades that officials openly question the practical boundaries of the free throw clock, setting the stage for debates about enforcement consistency in subsequent seasons. Dwight Howard, an 8-time All-Star and 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, closes his career with a free throw percentage of just 56.7%. Because of persistent struggles, he experiments with unconventional methods, including closing his eyes during attempts and quietly mouthing song lyrics to settle his rhythm. The 2009 Finals place his routine under national scrutiny, as he converts only 8 of 14 free throws in Game 4 against the Lakers. Those misses directly shape Orlando's late-game possessions, reducing offensive efficiency in a matchup where margins remain slim. The side of a dominant center searching for tricks at the line reflects how mechanics often resist quick fixes. Comparisons to Shaquille O'Neal's surface quickly, since both big men anchor their franchises while inviting deliberate fouling strategies. Opponents refine Howard in the late 2000s, exploiting his low conversion rate to disrupt Orlando's pace and force the ball out of his hands. Coaches tolerate the routine experiments because his defensive presence offsets scoring losses, but efficiency never rises to league average. By the end of his prime, Howard abandons most rituals, yet the weakness continues to trail him across multiple teams. The persistence of the problem links his career arc back to earlier free throw struggles by Shaq, establishing continuity in how dominant centers shape rule debates and opponent strategies. Ben Wallace, a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year and central figure in Detroit's 2004 championship, closes his career with a free throw percentage of just 41.4%. Unlike other struggling big men, he refuses to build any elaborate ritual, instead grabbing the ball and releasing it almost immediately after the whistle. Because of this lack of rhythm, his attempts rarely show consistency, and fans inside the palace of Auburn Hills often held their breath expecting a miss. Over his career, he averages for 0.1 attempts per game, and most result in what opponents considered wasted possessions. His defensive dominance made those misses both tolerable and maddening. Depending on which bench you supported, the hack-a-bend tactic becomes common during playoff runs, as rival coaches instruct players to foul him deliberately, rather than allow Detroit's efficient half-court sets. Even in the 2004 Finals against the Lakers, where Wallace's rebounding secures momentum, his free throw conversion rarely surpasses 30% in a series. Because Detroit's defense suppresses scoring, the Pistons can survive the inefficiency, but the strategy reflects how glaring the weakness is across his entire career. Opponents exploit it relentlessly, turning his trips to the line into live demonstrations of chance. The problem reinforces a broader pattern where dominant interior defenders share the same free throw vulnerability, a link that continues into the next generation of centers. Adrien Jordan, the Clippers starting center through the mid-2010s, records a career free throw percentage of only 47.5%, one of the lowest among modern starters. His struggles escalate in the 2015 Western Conference semifinals against Houston, where he is fouled 28 times in Game 4 alone, setting a playoff record because the Hack of Jordan tactic repeatedly interrupts play. Coaches, referees, and league officials debate whether to adjust rules to discourage the practice. Meanwhile, Jordan experiments with unusual methods at the line, including quietly humming to himself before release, but none provide lasting improvement. The sight of defenders wrapping him up before he even receives a pass becomes a defining feature of his prime years in Los Angeles. As his career progresses, Jordan abandons the humming routine and simplifies his approach, though the accuracy remains below 50% well into his 30s. The problem limits his late game usage, because intentional fouls transform possessions into near-automatic turnovers. By the time he shifts into journeyman roles with Brooklyn, Denver, and Philadelphia, he is no longer viewed as a reliable offensive presence in close contests. His ritual, like his percentage, fades into trivia about one of the league's most efficient dunkers who never solved the quietest shot in basketball. The pattern of fouling big men for strategy instead of defense carries over into other cases, including Dwight Howard and Ben Wallace, showing how persistent the problem becomes for certain archetypes. Charles Barkley, the 6'6" forward who ranks among the most prolific rebounders of his era, pairs his physical dominance with a notoriously awkward free throw routine. He averages 9.2 attempts per game in the 1988-89 season, so his constant dribbling and extended pause at the line become a fixture on broadcasts. Teammates label the exaggerated rhythm the Charles dance, while television crews highlight his shifting footwork in slow-motion replays. Because his delivery looks unpredictable, defenders often anticipate a mistimed release, but Barkley still converts at a career rate of 73.5%. For a player who thrives on tempo and live play, his free throw form stands out for its hesitation and delay. The odd cadence does not prevent Barkley from remaining an effective scorer, since his aggressive style guarantees steady trips to the stripe for over a decade. Opponents, broadcasters, and even fans often mock the stop and start motion, yet the results remain serviceable compared to big men of his generation. Meanwhile, his unorthodox presentation adds the image of a player who mixes efficiency with spectacle, even when standing at the quietest spot on the floor. Barkley's pauses at the line fit within a larger landscape of strange rituals that turn free throws into unique spectacles rather than routine possessions. Michael Jordan standardizes his free throw approach by spinning the ball in his hands, bouncing it once, and then exhaling deeply before release. Across 15 seasons, this sequence supports an 83.5% career conversion rate, well above the league average that hovered between 73 and 76% during the 1980s and 1990s. Because the routine creates rhythm and predictability, Jordan rarely deviates, even in high-pressure possessions. His teammates note the consistency, describing how the single bounce signaled both composure and readiness. Viewers recognize the ritual as much as the shot itself. The 1998 finals highlight the effect of ritual under maximum pressure. In Game 6 against Utah, Jordan follows his exact sequence to hit critical free throws in the final minute, extending Chicago's narrow lead. Broadcast replays linger on the spin, bounce, and exhale, framing it as part of his larger image of control. Sponsors quickly adapt the gesture for commercials, embedding the routine into sneaker and apparel marketing. Youth leagues soon replicate it, with coaches teaching the one-bounce rhythm as a way to build confidence at the line. The copycat culture shows how Jordan-esque ritual shifts from a personal aid to a widely endorsed standard. The marketing wave also reinforces his cultural imprint, with children in driveway games copying the spin and breath before casual foul shots. Because media repeatedly associates the sequence with success, the gesture becomes shorthand for focus and winning mentality. By the early 2000s, commentators reference doing the Jordan when players adopt a minimal routine at the stripe. The repetition helps cement the idea that free throw rhythm is not only mechanical, but also psychological. The widespread adoption ensures Jordan's one-bounce ritual remains one of the most recognizable in basketball history. The influence of Jordan's consistent routine paves the way for a broader examination of how free throw rituals evolve into signatures across eras and players. Superstitions. Free throw superstition often surfaces in minor rituals that have no technical basis, but provide players with psychological comfort. Across decades, guards and forwards alike admit to wearing the same socks during scoring streaks, believing that consistency in clothing extends to consistency at the line. These habits persist because they impose a sense of control on a fundamentally repetitive but high-pressure task. Coaches rarely intervene, since the actions consume little time and do not conflict with league regulations. The absence of formal restrictions leaves space for endless individual quirks. Some superstitions take the form of visible gestures that spectators easily recognize. Daikin Mutombo, a four-time Defensive Player of the Year, regularly rubs his head before release, explaining that the motion calmed nerves. Nate Robinson, who stood 5 feet 9 inches and relied on ritual for rhythm, was known to whisper to the basketball before attempts. Rasheed Wallace, meanwhile, occasionally spat out gum just before stepping to the stripe, treating the act as a symbolic reset. These actions drew commentary, but were never penalized, since officials focused on timing and foot placement rather than pre-shot behaviors. Because none of these quirks violated the 10-second shooting limit or delayed play, referees tolerated them as part of the game's character. The tolerance reinforced the idea that free throw routines extend beyond mechanics to encompass individual belief systems, however idiosyncratic. Fans came to associate each player's gesture with their personality as much as their accuracy. The persistence of unpunished superstitions underscores how the NBA allows ritualized behavior to coexist with technical precision. These permissive boundaries lead directly into the era when formal routines like Jason Kidd's kiss gesture became household talking points. Modern era. By the mid-2010s, the NBA began to scrutinize the length of free throw routines more closely, citing pace of play concerns and fan engagement. In 2016, league officials specifically emphasized enforcement of the 10-second rule, which had existed since the 1970s but was rarely applied with consistency. The adjustment reflected how televised games, often running past 2 hours, required tighter control over stoppages. As referees tracked timing with a stopwatch-like precision, players became more deliberate in trimming extra dribbles, pauses, or gestures from their process. The rule's stricter interpretation meant that ritual now carried measurable risk. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who relied on a drawn-out preparation at the line, became the most visible case of enforcement. On several occasions between 2021 and 2022, referees assessed violations when his routine stretched beyond the 10-second threshold, and the league eventually issued fines for repeat delays. His example demonstrated how a personal comfort sequence could collide with regulatory standards. In a modern broadcast environment, other players quickly adjusted, knowing that long delays risk both turnovers in critical moments and unwanted viral attention. The result was a shift toward concise, but still recognizable rituals, because every attempt is now filmed in high definition and clipped for distribution. Free throw routines spread globally within hours of a game. Platforms like TikTok and Instagram elevate small quirks, hand claps, whispers, spins into memes consumed far outside traditional basketball audiences. This visibility reshapes how young players replicate moves, ensuring that rituals circulate as much through social media as through televised broadcasts. The combination of stricter enforcement and constant surveillance defines the modern era of free throw behavior. That environment sets the stage for examining how earlier generations shaped the habits that today as players must compress into precise, time-bound actions. Legacy free throw rituals persist because they embody psychology, rhythm, and superstition, not just mechanical shooting form. Players adopt idiosyncratic patterns, whether extra dribbles, pauses, or gestures to control nerves and stabilize rhythm under pressure. These habits influence how defenders prepare for rebounds, as unusual timing can disrupt box-out positioning or create hesitation on the lane. Because the line isolates a single player, each repetition of a ritual reinforces the perception of control. The act becomes as much mental as physical. Crowds shape these routines further, because chants, jeers, or synchronized claps interact with ritual as either reinforcement or distraction. Opposing fans often mock a player's quirks, while home crowds amplify them with encouragement, making free throws a shared spectacle rather than a solitary act. In playoff settings, where games regularly hinge on 2 or 3 possessions, the success of a ritualized process determines championship outcomes. Michael Jordan's calm exhale in 1998 or Dirk Nowitzki's one-leg balance in 2011 illustrate how repeated sequences can stabilize performance. When stakes rise, the cumulative effect ensures that the free throw line never feels automatic. Even for the best shooters, rituals guarantee unpredictability in pace, defensive rhythm, and crowd involvement, making each attempt a distinct event rather than a routine exchange. Because championships and reputations often hinge on the line, these personal quirks become part of the league's broader identity, connecting eras from George Meekin's time to today's viral clips. That continuity cements free throw rituals as not only an individual comfort mechanism, but also a defining layer of NBA history, bridging past innovations with a modern game.